Hello, in this video I'm going to be showing you 5 ways to catch a carp when you're really struggling for a bite. So without wasting any time, let's get into tip number 1. So the first way that you can get a bite if you're really struggling is to recast one of your rods. So if you've left your rods out for a few hours, say overnight or sort of 12 hours throughout the day, and nothing's happened, then it's definitely worth having a rechuck of one of those rods, or all your rods. You know, you might have had a tangle, the rod might have landed awkwardly on the bottom, the rig might have gone over a twig or something, and the fish might have come in and fed in your area but not been able to pick up your hook bait for whatever reason. I've lost count of the amount of times that I've rechucked a rod and then had a fish very soon after. Don't be afraid that you're going to spook the fish. Some waters the fish are very spooky, but if you look around and you see ducks landing on the surface making a splash, and the fish are quite used to kind of noise around them in the water, and it might spook them initially, but if there's food there you can be sure that they will come back eventually. So a rechuck, make sure that rig is set perfectly and you might just manage to nick a fish. The second way you can tempt a bite if you're struggling is to cast to showing fish. You've probably heard this loads of times before, but it really makes sense. You know, if you're fishing in an area and you're not really seeing any fish and you've got a load of bait out there and the fish just aren't coming onto the bait, but you've seen a fish, you know, 50 yards to your left or right, or, you know, somewhere that you're not going to cast into someone else's water, but if there's a fish within your water that's showing itself, it may well be feeding, and if you cast a single hook bait towards that fish, you're in a really good shout of catching. You don't really need any free bait because the fish is already there. You're not trying to track the fish, you're just trying to catch it, and it may already be feeding, so your hook bait in amongst whatever that fish is feeding on has got a really good chance of being picked up. So tip 2, very simple one and very, very common one that you hear, but cast to showing fish. Give it a go, it really does work. The third tip I can give you, and you will have heard this before, but it really makes sense, and that is to move swims. If you're in an area where you're not catching and you've been there for a while, you know, and your fishing tactics you're confident in, and you're still not catching, there's a good chance that there's no carp there, or the carp that are there aren't particularly feeding. So it's worth keeping an eye on the water all the time. If you see fish in another area, move on to them. Don't waste any time because you can't catch what's not in front of you. So tip number 3 is to move swims if you're not catching in your current swim. Tip number 4 is to try baits suspended in the upper layers. So obviously zig rigs are the way forward. If you're seeing fish in an area and you've got baits out on the bottom and the fish are still showing and you're not getting any takes, there's a good chance those fish are up off the bottom. So trying a zig rig or 3 zig rigs at different depths, you might just find where the fish are spending their time, and they might be feeding on sort of insects in the upper layers, and putting your bait in amongst them could very easily make the difference between catching and failure. So if you're struggling for a bite and you're seeing fish, definitely try a zig. Look at conditions as well, because if you've got clear skies and high pressure, the fish are more likely to be up in the water, but don't discount zigs in any conditions or at any time of year. They're always worth a go if you're struggling. Tip number 5 is to try topping up your bait. Now, a lot of the time this can be counterproductive. You know, you don't want to put too much bait out in the swim, especially if you're not catching, because the fish obviously haven't been visiting it if you haven't got any bites, and there still could be quite a bit of bait out there. But if you're fishing particularly boilie tactics and you started off with enough for a bite, which in my eyes is somewhere between sort of 10 and 15 baits or so, and you haven't caught like that, put out another 5 baits, only 5 or 6 baits, and it just puts a bit of fresh smell in the area, a little bit of noise on the surface as well. Just could be enough to bring the fish in if there's any close by. Carp are very inquisitive and a little bit of noise and a little bit of fresh smell in an area could just bring them in, and hopefully they find your hook bait. So I'm not talking about filling it in, but if you think that your baited area maybe has gone stale, you know, a few fresh baits in the area can just liven it up enough to get you that all-important bite. So I hope this has been helpful for you guys. If you like the video, please give a thumbs up, comment down below any tips that you think that you do to get extra bites, and remember to subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.